They said she was too small, too emotional. They said a woman didn't belong in a combat zone, much less among the most elite warriors in the United States military, the Navy SEALs. She'd heard it all before. The jokes, the glances, the quiet disbelief that someone like her could lead men trained to kill, survive, and obey no one but their own. But war has a way of silencing opinions, and on one mission, when everything that could go wrong did, the soldiers who once laughed behind her back found themselves looking to her for orders. That day, when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, something changed forever. Because when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Dalton stepped forward, the laughter stopped, and the salute began. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Dalton, a logistics officer in the U.S. Navy, stationed in Afghanistan in 2009. She wasn't a SEAL herself, but she had a job that was just as critical: to ensure the missions had what they needed when and where they needed it. Fuel, ammo, transport, extraction timing. Everything depended on her precision. She was assigned directly to a SEAL task unit, a first in that region, and while her commanders trusted her skill, not everyone on the ground did. To some of the men, she was a symbol of politics, not competence. To others, she was a potential liability. One mistake away from disaster. They didn't see her years of experience. They didn't know the hours she'd spent studying every inch of those valleys and roads. They just saw a woman among them. And to them, that was enough reason to doubt. She heard the snickers when she walked by. She saw the eyes roll when she gave instructions. But she kept her head down, her tone professional, and her mission clear. Because Sarah wasn't there to prove them wrong. She was there to bring them home. The mission was meant to be routine. A supply convoy through a stretch of Afghan desert, known for insurgent ambushes. Sarah had mapped the route herself, checked the intelligence twice, and timed their departure for low visibility. Still, something about that valley never sat right with her. Locals called it the mouth of smoke. Because no convoy had passed through it without losing someone. As the trucks rolled out before dawn, engines low and lights dimmed, Sarah rode in the second vehicle. Headset on, map in hand, scanning every movement on the ridges. The first 30 minutes were calm. Too calm. The men started to relax, even joke a little. One of them glanced at her and smirked. "Guess the lady luck thing's real, huh?" She didn't respond. She was staring at the horizon, and that's when the world went white. An explosion ripped through the lead truck. Metal and sand flew through the air. The shockwave slammed into Sarah's vehicle, throwing her against the side panel. Screams filled the radio. Smoke poured across the valley. Gunfire echoed from the cliffs. The commanding officer was unconscious, hit by debris. The radio operator was down. Half the convoy was trapped, and enemy fire was closing in. For a split second, time froze. Every man was waiting for someone to tell them what to do. But no one spoke. Then a single voice cut through the chaos. Sarah grabbed the half-broken radio and shouted, "Everyone fall back behind the ridge. Secure the wounded. Reboot comes manually." She jumped from the truck, her boots sinking into the hot sand. She dragged the injured radio operator behind cover, firing short bursts to suppress movement. Bullets whistled past her. One tore through her sleeve. She didn't flinch. The SEALs saw her crawling through smoke, barking orders, and somehow, in that moment, they followed her. Within minutes, she'd reorganized the perimeter, patched communications, and called for a medevac, using an almost dead transmitter. When the helicopters finally appeared, every man in that convoy was alive. Hours later, when the last helicopter lifted off and the valley fell silent again, the adrenaline faded. The men who had once joked about her looked at her differently now. She stood quietly near the burnt-out vehicles, her uniform streaked with soot, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of what just happened. No one spoke. The desert wind carried the only sound, the faint rustle of an American flag patch against fabric. Then one SEAL, the same one who doubted her the most, walked up slowly. He stood straight, eyes fixed forward, and saluted. Another followed, and another, until every man on that line, bruised, bloodied, exhausted, was saluting the woman they had once dismissed. They weren't saluting a rank. They were saluting respect, earned, not given. Sarah didn't speak about that mission again. In her report, she simply wrote, "Convoy compromised. All personnel recovered. Mission complete." No mention of what she'd done. No mention of how she'd taken command under fire. That was just her way. Quiet service. No headlines. No speeches. But the men she saved never forgot. In private, they told the story. Not to glorify her, but to remind others that leadership has nothing to do with gender or muscle or bravado. It comes down to who stands up when everything falls apart. And in that desert, when chaos reigned and hope faded, the only one standing tall was her. Years later, some of those SEALs left the military. Some stayed, but whenever her name came up, in reunions, in stories told over beer and quiet music, they all said the same thing. She didn't ask to be respected. She just earned it. Sarah Dalton went on to serve in multiple deployments, training new officers, mentoring younger women who would one day step into roles she had once fought to prove possible. She never claimed to be a pioneer, but every woman who came after her, who walked into a male-dominated room wearing a Navy uniform, carried a piece of her courage with them. Because in one dusty Afghan valley, she didn't just survive the mission. She rewrote the definition of strength. War reveals people, not by what they say, but by what they do when everything breaks. And Sarah Dalton proved that courage doesn't depend on body size or gender. It's measured in decisions, in calm under fire, in the quiet strength to lead when no one expects you to. She never sought fame. She didn't care for medals. Her legacy lives in the silence after the salute. That moment when even the toughest warriors lower their heads, not because they're told to, but because respect demands it. Because in war, respect isn't given. It's earned under fire. Pause. Soft wind sound. This is not just history. This is her story.